are so we can get you started on this meeting.
Nancy Bonacera.
Sayed Ghani.
Carl Foss.
Nick Priest.
Barbara Jean, Edison Reed, what I have to say every day. Just BJ. Okay, let's get started. We're going to follow the agenda. And the first thing that we want to talk about are the minutes from July 13th and July 27th. Carl?
I sent everybody a PDF this afternoon. Sorry for the late hour. I hope you had a minute to review it. Did anyone notice any changes or additions I need to make?
I didn't get a chance to review. I'm browsing through it right now. Give me one moment.
They looked fine to me, Carl.
Thank you.
Okay with me.
Said, if you don't feel comfortable, you can always abstain from the vote.
No, I'm almost done through the first one. Give me one moment.
Okay, take your time.
All right, 13 is good. Looking at 27th now. Looks good.
All right, I move that we approve the minutes from July 13th, 2022.
Second? Saeed?
Aye. Sayed Ghani, aye. Sorry.
Carl
Okay,
Foss,
let's
aye.
vote. Call your name and your vote, please.
Carl Foss, aye.
Sayed Ghani, aye.
Nancy Bonacera. Aye.
Nick Priest, aye.
BJ, aye.
Thank you all. Second, I vote that I move that we approve the minutes from July 27th, 2022.
Second.
Those in favor?
Sayed
Carl,
Ghani,
aye.
Aye.
Nick Priest,
Aye.
aye.
5-0.
Thank you all.
With the minutes. Thank you, Carl. Okay, second item on the agenda is to look at the Select Board and the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee performance evaluation. That's the document that you received at our last meeting. We're going to talk about that and the thoughts you might have on what is suggested here for the time that we meet. If I could go through it, that would point us in the right direction. And any questions that you have, you want to engage in conversation, please feel free to do that. So it's the performance evaluation for Barbara Edison Reed and the DEI committee. And we start out with the process that's used with philosophy and core values, mission, goals, decisions, actions, results, self-appraisal. The first activity is to explore how people think. And the suggestion is made in the book, Start with Why, How Great Leaders Inspire Everyone to Take Action. The why is defined as your purpose, cause, and your beliefs. The how is defined as your values and behaviors, and to share yourself with other people. The what is defined as the strategy that is used to achieve goals and results. And then I begin with a statement about my philosophy, and that it's important in the philosophy of any organization to recognize that people work there and every person must be treated with kindness, honor, and respect as they engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion for the organization. We then presented both the philosophy and the mission statement to the Select Board, and the vote took place only for the mission statement. The philosophy that we presented was that diversity, equity, and inclusion committee believes that all people who share this planet are diverse, equal, and deserving of inclusion. We want to strive toward a community where education, healthcare, housing, jobs and careers, voting, and security provided by the government, military, and the police are equitable and inclusive for all. Given this philosophy, DE&I committee began the diversity, equity, and inclusion for all the people who are educated and reside in the town of Burlington, Massachusetts. What I'm suggesting here is that the board consider the philosophy statement and then make a decision about including them as being the believer, and it would say the select board and DEI committee believe. So it's just that first sentence that would change. Any comments? Page 2, we look at the core values, which is the first category that we look in the process. And here, based on the book called The Lakota Way, we have 12 categories that are humility, perseverance, respect, honor, love, sacrifice, truth, compassion, bravery, fortitude, generosity, and wisdom. And the definitions come from the Webster Dictionary. And what we want the select board to engage in 2 activities. One is to look at the list of 12 and decide what's important for each person to choose their own values and understand that the values also control your behavior, how you treat yourself and how you treat other people. And then once we have a discussion about the 12 and how people differ or where they're the same, then the next step in the process is to combine what the 5 people who serve as select board think the values should be for the board. So people can be different from an organization that they are leading, but there needs to be conversation among the 5 people to choose of the 12, which are the 4 or 5 or 6 or 8, how many ever they want to choose, to say that these are the values of the select board. And that should also be communicated to the executives who work for the select board so that they understand the foundation of where we're coming from with this activity. Page 3 in your materials, look at your core values and the select board's core values. Then on page 4, we have the mission statement. And just to tell you what was adopted in April was, instead of people being the 5th entry on the mission statement, the first entry is now focused on people. And the foundation for that is that in any organization, it's not how each organization is trying to manage or how they're trying to find the finances or whatever product they're putting on the street. The first priority are the people who work there and how they are treated. And so that's why we have the first statement is to create a sense of community with the town of Burlington to embrace and engage in diversity, equity, and inclusion, so that the soul of the community is to accept who we are and support our efforts to succeed in how we live in a mixed community nature of the town. So that's what they adopted. It's number 1 for us, and it should be number 1 in every organization that we talk to, every business whom they talk to. How you treat the people there is how they then treat the customer. And that's why you raise it to be important as it is. On page 5, we then talk about the definitions, diversity, equity, inclusion. And they're the same ones that we have, except in this reference, we not only define diversity as variety, assortment, multiplicity, and a mixture for all the races, which are defined by the federal and state governments. And then I list each of the races, and they're there alphabetically. And then the last entry is to compare the results of total people of color, the percent, with the percent of Caucasians. You look at where's the balance. When I moved to Burlington back in 1976, African Americans, based on the census data, was about 1.4%. And when you look at it today, it's still 1.4%. The increase that we've had have been in Asians. And so today that's 16%, 16 plus percent. Unfortunate that the data that's been collected for how we examine who's in school here and who lives here has never been integrated, sustained, and not reviewed year after year after year to see whether there's any progress. That's one reason why we want to look at the scorecard to see how we're measuring and whether we're making progress or not. Same thing with the definition of equity and inclusion, and the board will have the opportunity to explore that and decide whether that's complete or whether they need to recommend that we consider other ways of addressing that. Page 6 looks at the three theory strategy for why, how, and what. And what I did with this is to look at Maslow's hierarchy, which came into being in 1943. And of course, he started his at the bottom with physiological. Once you have air, food, drink, sleep, shelter, and sex, then you could advance and learn to do what you need to do about safety, which is security and protection and stability. Once you have safety in your life, then you go to belonging, give and receive love, affection, and trust. If, for example, you're married and you decide you don't have much in common, you don't share the same values, your behavior's not the same, you don't think the same, and you decide you're not going to stay married, then you recline back and you're looking for another interest in your life where you can share that relationship. Maslow is saying that if you lose something in belonging, you go back to safety, you have to reestablish belonging again. You cannot go forward and look at esteem before you really belong in a relationship. That's his approach. Some people agree with that, some people don't. But that's what he published, and that's what people live by. And of course, you start with the bottom physiological safety, belonging, esteem, and self actualization. Realize your full potential and everything that you want to be capable of in your life. The second column is my theory, and I start at the bottom because I look at how human beings develop. Remember, my professional career was to work in human resources for any organization. And in order to do that, you have to know who are the people that you're engaged in and how do we all advance. So at the bottom of mine is your brain. You learn to do that when you're born. You're looking up at your mom, you're looking at your dad. And so that, you're trying to recognize and become reality with the people that are in front of you. Once you've advanced through that and you're able to stay alive and do what needs to be done, then your limbs begin to develop. And that's when you crawl. That's when you balance. You try and stand up. And when you walk, okay. And then there's exercise that you need to do in your life to sustain the way you are. And if you don't exercise, then it may shorten your life length. The third step for me are your values, your purpose, your causes, and your beliefs. And where that stimulates from are your parents. It can come from your relatives. It can come from the church. It can come from education and the people that you meet there. But it's what you learn how to do with your values and how your values control your behavior, how you treat yourself and others. That's very important to be successful. The fourth category for me is health. And those are challenges and loss of a loved one. For me, it's my brain and what I'm trying to do to be able to think and move forward. And also for me was the loss of my son back in 2019 when he was just 44 years old. And so how do you recover from that? What difficulty do you have? How do you experience it? How do you make decisions to move on? How do you grasp and say, I don't want to be pulled under because I cannot change the reality of what's happened. But how do you remember? How do you praise? How do you show that in how you live your life? And then the last category for me is resilience. When you lose health, how do you recover? When you lose a lost one, how do you recover? when you're disappointed in what your professional life is, how do you recover? It's all a process that we have to engage in and learn how to adjust that. And these are the 5 categories, and I want to publish my next book, which is about the 5 categories. Then the last one looks at the organization, and here what I've done, and for every organization that you're working with, the names here can change. I start at the bottom, just as I did for people, it's the brain first. For this, it's the leader of the organization. And here it's the select board. And the category that we're looking at is why. What is your purpose, your cause, and your beliefs? What does the select board think about their purpose, their cause, and beliefs, and why they're there? So you have creative ideas, a vision for what you think it should be, and then you have a mission statement. We've met that goal. Next to the select board, you have Burlington executives. They are the how. The thinking is, what are your values and behaviors? And what's the strategy that should be used in order to implement what we want to happen with our vision and mission? So if we're government, how do we go about that? And what's the strategy that would support each of the key executives as they move through their organization and educate the people that are working with them and for them in order to make reality of what we want the mission to be? The third category are managers and supervisors. And here is the application of the strategy. So that's where you look at what are the goals and how is that defined, evaluating whether the goal is acceptable, what are the successes that we want to achieve, what are the challenges we have to face, what is positive, what is negative that we may have to be prepared for and address. But examine that before you say, okay, we understand the breadth of what we're trying to do with this goal, and then make the positive decision and wrap our arms around it and how we're going to do it. Next, after you set the goal, then you have to have actions. What actions are going to be taken? And I always link those to a calendar so that in 3 months or 6 months or 9 months or 12 months, what are you going to do so that you have a time period which your performance is being evaluated into that achievement? I list managers and supervisors because they're in this community the people that are going to be managing people who are part of a union. And so the conversation to apply the strategy has to be made with the union representatives because I'll say this openly. Somehow in the past, managers did not effectively manage people, and they felt abused by managers. And that's when they sought out to be represented by a union because they felt protection from the union. So that's why we have unions that are organized in this town. Once those unions are in place, they're there to stay. And so in the categories that we have, managers look at the application of the strategy, what we want to achieve, and it's the union reps who then carry out the details with the goals, decision, action steps, results, and the self-appraisal. They have to include employees in that process. And then the top category are all the employees who work in the school department and for the community of Burlington. And they want to continue to learn throughout their lives, and they choose the values and control their own behavior so that they're engaged with every person who lives here. So that's why it's important to have the select board look at that layout of this and decide whether this is appropriate for representing them. If they want to have a discussion about managing another way, then certainly we're open to doing that. On page 7, I looked at the goals that we've done in 2022, and that's the philosophy, and then the select board mission statement. and the language changes to the rules and regulations and the union contracts. We submitted that. We don't know whether it's been implemented, so we need to check on that and go forward. And then we need to work with the key executives. And so in our next conversation, we'll talk about what we've been able to manage and how it's going and what strategies we need to think about going forward. And then, of course, everybody knows that the meeting they have on the 15th is where I'll do the second quarterly report for the board, and that's one we already adopted. But that's on the list because we want to see that finalized this year as well. On page 8, we look at to explore working with Paul Sagarino and Joanne for what she has in rules and regulations, and from my perspective, what Joanne needs to consider, because that hasn't been done. There's an opportunity to examine that, and to also work with Joanne because she's the one that collects the data, and we can then format for the select board what should be included in the Burlington Diversity Scorecard. Equity and Inclusion. We can change the title so it matches. But Joanne is the one that controls the paperwork, and between the two of us, we can arrange that, submit it to Paul for his approval, and then submit it to the select board for them to approve what's going to be in the scorecard. Okay, on page 9, we look at an example of how decisions are made, and where I talked about looking at the successes and the challenges. That's an exercise that the select board can do to begin to look at how they make decisions and to get them to think a different way than they have in the past. Page 10 looks at action steps, and here is an example of to do it by calendar. What we're going to look at for the remainder of this year. The first part of this year is already recorded, and the second half is to go. When we look at the results, it's what we expected, and we can say it's accomplished or not accomplished, or we're still looking at where we are because there's a July 30th and we don't know whether we accomplished that, and there's several more here that we have to focus on for this year. And then the last page is page 12, and it looks at self-appraisal. The background for this, I may have shared with you before, is where I gathered data at IBM to look at how they treated managers of African Americans who were managing people in the company. And there were two realities that I explored. One is that IBM has a university inside their business. And so if you graduated high school and you're in your first manager, they don't use the term supervisor. Manager means you're more advanced, but you're prepared to do that. Then they would have someone who looks at their performance from a manager, but they also have a mentor who's observing what they do and can provide them with feedback. So there are two routines that every employee who's in a manager's position gets feedback on their performance. Upline manager, and one who's a colleague who helps them to identify and suggest how they make changes. The second thing that I learned was that every employee at IBM must engage in self-appraisal. And that means that you have to look at your performance with regard, in our opinion, for diversity, equity, and inclusion, how they're making that happen in the organization where they work. And they should document their performance. That's what the self-appraisal does. And this says that if you're in a 12-month cycle, how long you've worked for the town or for the school department. In the 11th month is where you evaluate your own performance. You prepare a written report where you were successful and where you weren't successful and why you think that happened. You submit it to your upline manager, and they can agree or disagree. They should also write out their report. And after you have your discussion, both reports are given to human resources to go into your employee file. So your appraisal and your upline manager's appraisal on what your performance was. It's a different way of doing things, but it's one that works. And it's in an organization like IBM that does international work where people survive and they're happy because they feel they're treated with dignity and respect. And it's given back to them by managers who've learned how to do it better because of this opportunity to engage with their employees. Different than when you are represented by a union rep who only looks at for what you ask, but they don't evaluate. So it's a little different. Something for us to consider for the select board to have a discussion, think about it, and decide, is this what we want to do or not? And if not, then how do we change it another way? The door is open to do that. So I wanted to review that with you so you had an opportunity to read it for yourself, and maybe you have questions, thoughts, ideas.
I have no questions. I just want to say thank you for putting it all together and reviewing it with us, BJ.
You're welcome.
I have a question, BJ, just to make sure I understand this correctly. On pages 10 and 11, when you say manager, you're talking about a department manager.
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
okay,
Even from the chart. Remember, the chart is on page 6. So we have select board,
right,
Burlington executives, managers and supervisors,
right. Yep, thank
then
you.
union rep
Mhm.
and employees. So maybe those are the words that I chose. I didn't have anybody that could check it and say, did you do it right? But yes, that's what I'm thinking.
Perfect, okay.
And also the definition of why, how, and what. And if you haven't read the book, starting with why, you got to do it. I read it in 2019. That's after I had surgery and I could think it through. And it really worked for me because you have to know what the communication is and how you relate to each other. And when you want to move the organization to change, how you structure so that everybody is engaged in the thinking process and the application of the thinking process and treating employees with dignity and respect so that they can participate and know how much we value them. And the better we are at valuing every employee, the better they are with people that they educate or people that they are trying to support for things that they're doing for the community. It changes our behavior and our ability to engage with each other based on how we treat the people that are here.
Makes sense.
It really does. It really does. I think I should tell you, not only did I gather the data at IBM when I did a master's degree in education, I did it at Tufts because I was head of human resources there. But the students I counseled when they were trying to make a decision which career they needed to go to. So that's why I have a master's in counseling, but it was about how to decide which avenue you should proceed. I'll just give you just one example to think about. And that is when you are in a state, you need to look at what are the top priorities for living in that environment. For Massachusetts, it's universities, 56 college universities in the city limits, 103 in the state. More educational institutions here in this state than any other place on the planet. So, education is one. The second one is health and hospitals. Those are 2 nonprofits. The other 2 are finance and computers, and those are the technical. So one here we're looking at people and the other is looking at the technique for doing it. You have to figure out where are you, and that's why you want to evaluate what are your values, what's your behavior. Another way of looking at it, are you an extrovert or an introvert? If you're an extrovert, you want to work around people and manage and do it appropriately. If you're an introvert, then it means you'd rather look at the technique and the strategy and use your intellect to figure out how do you move forward. So if you have that as a guidance in choosing your profession, then you could make the decision as I did. That's why I worked in higher ed. And only 9 years did I spend in corporate, and that was for ADP. But instead of just looking at Massachusetts, the variety for me at was to understand federal law, but Massachusetts, Rhode Island, New Hampshire, and Maine. That's the legal background that I had to have to manage human resources for New England. So it was very different, but it was for business. So when you make your decision, that's how you need to think about it and put yourself in the path that you want to go and then follow through. And that only continues your growth and your engagement and your learning, but it also impacts the ability to earn and to be recognized for what you're doing. Other comments?
This looks good to me, BJ. Again, I'll echo Carl's comments here or statement here. Thank you very much for putting this together.
Thank you.
Thank you, BJ.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, no comments or questions from me. This looks good.
Okay. So we have 2 agenda items on the meeting next Monday. I just want to confirm that. The first one is the second quarter. And I go to the meeting, I'll have to wear a mask, but I'll go to the meeting and present it. And if there are any questions, we can address that. And then the second item is when do we want to have the meeting between the 5 people here or the 5 people there and the 4 or 5 of us here. And so we settle on that date and then we can all pull together. And my hunch, Nick, is that it would not be in the conference room where the select board meetings are held. There'd be another space. Yes.
So regardless of how the meeting is run, I know we were going back and forth on that for a while. I think that we can maybe do it at Grandview or something that's more workshop oriented.
Yes.
Like the second floor of the Grandview has the tables we can push together and actually work. I think that'd be more conducive to the what we're after than working on the dais or pulling chairs or making that room try to function as
Yeah, that'd be great. That'd be great because I can make copies for every select board member to have this. And we can proceed and do some of the exercises. The other thing that I want to bring is a copy of the Lakota Way. I have some here that I can bring to that meeting so that each of you can have a copy of that. Because it's my understanding, I heard a phrase used from a tribe out of Canada. They're using the reference to First Nation, Indigenous, Native, North American instead of Central America and South America. But that First Nation recognizes they're the first tribe here. And this book, The Lakota Way, has the chapters that are each of the 12 categories for values. And the book is yours. It's a paperback, but you can have it and read it because Marshall, the author, presents 2 stories under each of those titles of how the Native Americans addressed it in their lives. It's different from how we would do it, but it communicates the value of understanding what humility is like. And it matches the definitions that I got from the dictionary on what it means to us. And sometimes when you're talking this through, for me, my number one category is love. You have to love yourself and you have to love everybody else and understand that we're all equal. Some people can't say that they love everybody else. That's just not where they are. And so to talk about it and say what is more valuable is to show that it's kindness. You can demonstrate how you care through the kindness that you give to people, not that you love them. So that's a conversation that we can have with the select board. And it's up to us as a group to decide what's more appropriate, how does it work? And once we create that, then I go through this same exercise again of mapping out the decision and when it's approved and how it's done and what the language is. And we're making it concrete. I should also say for you that every time you look at diversity, equity, inclusion, the first step is what we did last fall. And that is, where is Burlington today? Where is the Burlington School Department today? And you're measuring what's been happened in the past. You print that up and you say, this is not sufficient, we need to go forward. And that's why you map out the strategy. What are the issues you're going to do? And how do you go about it? How did you educate? What do you put into place? And so it takes a while to do that. And so this first meeting, I think, will be outstanding, will help to pave the path for what we go to next. Any other thoughts?
I just kind of a logistical point is this never happens, but I am triple booked for municipal meetings on Monday if you count select board. And so I have school building committee and rec commission on Monday night. The other three of us, well, Nick, obviously you'll be there, but Nancy and Saida, you guys gonna go? Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I had mentioned in the previous meeting, our previous meeting, that I may not be able to go because of a prior engagement. So I'm most
Yes, I
likely
remember,
going to
yeah.
be there.
Sorry, Carl.
Yeah, apologies that I won't be able to be there.
Yes, understood. And I will be there because I'm there to watch what the select board is doing. I haven't missed a meeting. And I don't want to miss one now. Okay. Next item on the agenda is to look at Burlington executives. So what I have checked off we talked to the Board of Assessors. That's done. We're supposed to meet with them in September. Yes, Nancy?
Yes.
Board of Health. Nancy and Carl. Where are we?
Well, we had some information from
Ed.
Mr.
Michael Green was here.
Mr. Green last week.
Okay.
And then you said, or it sounded like Ed was supposed to contact us or contact BJ. That's the part.
I haven't heard from him.
Yeah, that was left at. Like, he was supposed to talk to the department, his own, Board of Health, and figure out what they wanted to do, or then they would get in contact with us. I'm not exactly
Yeah,
sure.
you're right. It was
Maybe we should
unclear. It was
reach
left
out.
in an unclear way.
Yeah.
I'll
Kind
try
of
to call him
open-ended.
tomorrow.
Okay.
So you're gonna call him.
I'll call Ed tomorrow. I'll call Dr. Weiner tomorrow.
Okay. Recreation. Carl and Nancy.
Yes, we did meet with them.
We met with them.
Mhm.
They're already pursuing some items under the DEI umbrella, but what I am noticing is that a lot of these boards seem to want to, and I think this is a great idea, kind of have a liaison between themselves and us, and those liaisons could attend our meetings and tell what's going on with their particular board. Trying to remember the young woman's name that we met with at Recreation.
I want to
Nancy, do you
say
remember?
it's Emma Jones.
Yes, thank you so
Yep,
much, Emma Jones.
Oh, it is Jones. Okay. Yeah.
And so she runs the therapeutic recreation programming. And so it would, just as an example, she might be a good liaison between us and recreation. Mr. Green, Michael Green, was from Board of Health last week. I think that, there's, I think, a lot of potential, so we can kind of stay appraised of what each department is doing, if it's appropriate, that for them to appoint a liaison between DEI and themselves.
It's okay with me. If they have a representative coming from each group, I'm okay with that. You, Nick, you okay with that?
Yeah, that's I mean, we're not making them voting members of the subcommittee, so I mean, people are more than welcome to come and liaise.
Okay. Do you remember what time or what date you met with Kevin Sullivan?
Well, Mr. Sullivan's not the chair anymore. It was actually I think in the beginning of June. It's Steve Nelson is the chair of Recreation now. But we met with Mr. Nelson and Brendan Egan, who is a director of Recreation. Kelly Lehman, who is the assistant director, was there. She's not the assistant director. She's a program coordinator. And Emma Jones was there, who runs therapeutic. But I can look up the date right now.
Yeah, I have it right here, actually.
Oh, thanks, Nancy.
July 7th was when we met with them. And you said you have a recreation subcommittee or a commission meeting coming up, or?
Yeah, it's on Monday night, the 15th.
Okay. Do you know if you guys will talk about the mission statement, or is that not on the agenda? Oh yeah, they said that they're very busy right now, which is obvious. And they're gonna
Right.
do it after. That's fine. Yeah, I was just trying to, because it's been a while.
I don't think we got the agenda yet. I'll try to get him to add it, or I'll bring it up in old business or something.
Yeah, I think we did talk with them about timeline, and they had basically said maybe at the end of summer, since summer's crazy for
early
them.
fall, I think.
So that makes sense. Okay.
But they were open to it.
Yep.
Carl and I met with Catherine Bond for the school committee, and they don't meet in August. And so she has added the mission statement to their September meeting.
Well, we do meet in August. We have a meeting on Tuesday, the 16th. But what we talked about that morning was the school committee, the board members themselves were going to do some training, not necessarily specifically about DEI, but kind of anti-bias awareness training. We did some last summer. We couldn't get it together for this summer, so we're trying to get some dates in September. And my suggestion, and I think Catherine agreed, and I talked about it at the July meeting, is to use those special meetings and have our mission statement as one of the topics.
Right.
How we left it, BJ?
We did. We said that it would be September, they would look at it, and then they could present it to us in October.
Right, but it's not going to be, at least my impression was, not at a regular school committee meeting. It would be at one of these trainings that the school board is going to do as like an extra meeting.
I'm open to however she wants to share it, whether they want to create it without us, or whether they want to present and then let us provide feedback. It's okay.
Okay, great.
Finally had contact with the town clerk, and Nancy and I are scheduled to meet with Amy at 10 o'clock.
Yep. Friday, right?
On Friday. So that's coming up. I reached out for the planning board. I sent 2 emails, still don't have a response from Brenda Rappaport. And I understood from Buzz that they had one person resign and then another position is also available, and they're trying to figure out what to do. So we don't have anything established with the planning board yet. And then Rob Neufeld for the trustee of the library.
Yep.
Nancy and
Yep.
Carl.
Carl and I met with them last week on the 3rd. So we met Rob, and Michael Wick, the director of the library, was there too. And we had a nice conversation. The library is already pretty active in different DEI efforts. They often have, and if you walk in there, they'll have like their different book displays with different cultures and different months like Black History Month, Pride Month, and then they try to have activities and events. Like they did collaboration with the Indian Americans Greater Boston Association, where they did like a series on Indian culture, and they also have things like for the children's section on different holidays and cultures. They have a social justice club for middle schoolers. So, anyways, my point is that they do have a bunch of things going on. And then the other big thing that Carl and I found out is they have a strategic planning meeting coming up in the fall, and that's when they basically make like a 5-year plan for the library. And they basically invited one of us to join them because as we brought up the topic of the mission statement, Michael, the director, really wanted to put some, action plan and items behind it rather than just, okay, I'll add these words. He said that would be something they would look at the planning meeting and then also have an actual plan, like some items to go with it. So he invited one of us to be involved and attend those meetings. It sounded like there were 3 of them, and that would be somewhere we could put our input. But he also said they look for input from the community in the form of focus groups when they're putting together that plan as well. Um, so yeah, I think they're very open and they really want to, make things happen and work with us. So we can try to figure out who might be the person that wants to or can and has time to do this with the library, but I think it's a really good opportunity.
Thank you. Sounds like 2 things have happened from trying to initiate these conversations. Yes, we're looking for a mission statement, and it has to be done this fall so that we're able to publish it in the Burlington Annual Report. So that's a positive outcome. The second is that we have been invited as a community to participate with meetings they're conducting around diversity, equity, and inclusion to share, provide feedback, suggestions to participate in their meetings. So that means that it's opening the door a little wider, which is great. Think about the opportunity to engage with the trustees or with recreation, wherever you think it might be appropriate. We can have people join us and participate and listen to our meetings. And if you want to work with a group, it's okay if you make the decision to go to their meetings and continue to share communication and help them to focus on this issue as well. So that's a good outcome. Any
Yeah.
thoughts?
I completely agree with that. What I've really enjoyed is meeting people face to face because it just makes such a difference. It's so easy, as you all know, like on social media and everything, to just shoot things back and forth and misinterpret. But when you just, have a little chat and we like, hey, I've lived in Burlington this many years, my kids go to this school, it makes just that small little bit just makes that connection, and then you realize, okay, let's see what we can do together. And that's probably my favorite part of
Yes.
these meetings, putting faces to names and just starting to get to know each other, open the door, as you say.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
great.
Nancy, you used the word connection, which that hits for me because that's how we build a relationship and really make the progress that we want to see happen.
Agreed.
Absolutely. Next item we have on the agenda are for comments from anybody that's on WEBEX.
Sounded like a radio station there for a second, didn't it?
Just a bit.
You took the words right out of my mouth there.
It should be
Okay.
like what WDEI.
Yeah, I love it.
WEBEX is as good as we get.
Watch out, NPR, we're coming for you.
Yes, live from Burlington.
Well, you know what? We're on the ground floor. We got to push pretty hard.
So I have a comment. It's unrelated to DEI or our committee. So this past weekend, or I guess Saturday, when we had the Celebrate Burlington events.
Yes.
So on the recreation department's website, they had said that there would be fireworks at 9 p.m. And after I went there with my son, I found out that they had sent out I guess another announcement via social media that the fireworks wouldn't take place because of the drought-like conditions, right? But nobody updated the website.
Oh, yeah.
So I wasn't the only one who showed up there. There were other people there,
Yeah.
kids, and as you can imagine, the kids were really disappointed.
I'm
So
sure. We tried really hard.
yes. So I guess my comment is, who should I speak with, and I guess pass on my feedback that it's great that you send out an update through the social media accounts and whatnot, but can you please update your website as well, because that is the actual source of information.
Yeah.
Agree.
Definitely in this particular case, definitely reach out to Brendan and the rec staff. I'm sure it was an oversight given everything
Sure,
else.
I'm sure it was. I'm sure.
But absolutely, I mean, these are the things that, like, when we look at communications, that like it just chaps me, because I mean, this is no knock to the staff, right? Because we've got staff whose job it is not to manage communications, who are out there,
Yep.
going above and beyond on social media, trying to keep things updated, so that we get this information. And it's a slippery slope, So yeah, let them know, give them the feedback, and because as the communications research kicks off, which we kicked it off a couple weeks ago, and now we're entering into the interview phase of the whole thing. As the Collins Center folks talk to all the directors and everyone, those things can surface, and we can catalog it and say, okay, like here's where we're missing. Here's how we can remedy it. So
All right.
off topic, but appreciated.
Yeah, I know. Like I said, unrelated to DEI, but I wanted to get some idea in terms of who should I reach out to.
Yeah.
Yeah,
No,
definitely.
that definitely has been a concern of mine too, Saeed. Um, I mean, that's like a full-time job though, and I think I've talked with you about this too, Nick. Like just even having like a Town of Burlington Facebook or just dedicated place where you can find the news. I noticed on the town website they're starting to put some events, but again, I feel like yeah, the staff is probably stretched thin, so is that what you mean by when you said there's some interviews or planning going on for communications?
Yeah, so we got so I was I mean, this has been like 3 years in the making because of COVID, right? But I had initially drafted a communications research plan, and then we got funding for communications, and then we found out that the Collins Center, who does a lot of municipal based work, can help with a communications based audit. So we RFP'd it, and talked to them, and used the funding to support that, and went to town meeting for the additional funds and everything. Um, and and so now what's going to happen is we're going to conduct a like a research audit on how the town communicates things out to the residents, right?
Yeah.
And the end goal, the end report, will hopefully inform on ways that we can improve, right? So you could imagine that a communications director, or some kind of communication specific role might be a recommendation. Specific platforms that might unify things, so folks can like opt in and get, like maybe like like, I don't know, I'm just making this up, but like right now we use the reverse 911 system. Is there like a package that we can expand that to do more you know, and just like create, you know, more consistency and communication. So we're hoping to see what comes of it, and then, you know, where we have to go from there. But we finally kicked it off after all the funding and the operating budget was settled. So I'm looking forward to the coming months to see where that lands. Also, just another topic, bringing us back to DEI for a second, trying to square away with the staff the way that the reappointments were done. I know that that was a point of confusion at our last meeting. I believe that we just do all reappointments in June, and so regardless of whether or not we're ad hoc or standing, everyone just gets reappointed on a yearly basis, on a timed basis. Um, but I think that like there's got to be a way where we can maybe amend something, some policies, some bylaw, something where like ad hoc committees don't have to be re-upped in the middle of a 1-year term or however length term, because that's just a touch silly, and it's also very confusing because then you're being asked to come in to, you know, do your thing for, you know, through a different date, and it causes all that confusion. So. Got to look into it a little bit more, but we started talking about it.
So there wasn't a decision, or there was a decision to change the letters that we all received?
So once there hasn't been a decision. Once I figure out what the standing rule is, because this is something that I'm actually not super familiar with, and also involves the town clerk. Once we figure that out, we can figure out how we're going to move forward.
Yeah.
But
I do remember reading it in rules and regulations. So
right, yeah, because rules and regulations are only going to apply to staff and not to the elected or appointed boards. So that's a whole nother can of worms we had to unpack.
yeah, okay. I was going to say Brendan, who's with Recreation. My experience with him is that he is very positive. He's the person that I dealt with to buy the seat that's on the Burlington Common for my son. And he was so helpful in responding to emails that I sent to him and ordering the seat, and everything was just very clear with him. And the seat actually came in and was put into place in November, which seems late, but he managed it very well. So maybe he missed out on communications, but it's because he's being pulled in a lot of different directions. But he's a good person.
Yeah,
Second
great.
that.
Especially with the summertime and all their rec programs.
Yeah, yeah. It's just really great. Okay, next item on the agenda says that the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, 24th of August at 6. So it's 2 weeks out. Thank you, Nick. We'll get through the next week or so and see what it is that we have to put on the agenda with the select board and the date, and we'll just kind of catch up with each other.
So I have family visiting me starting next week. And I have some days off the following week, including the 24th. So I'm probably not going to be in the meeting on the 24th.
Got it.
Enjoy the time with your family.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Made a note. Have fun.
Thank you. It'll be after 26 years that all 4 siblings will be under one roof.
Oh, okay.
That's very exciting.
Nice.
It
Yeah.
is.
Well, it's important. The 26 is important for me because that's my last day of radiation, and I'm going to ring the bell.
Yes.
All right. So we need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Saeed,
I said motion to adjourn.
second.
Second.
All those in favor, say your name.
Nancy Bonacera. Yes.
Carl Foss, yes.
Nick Priest,
Yes,
yes.
Andy, yes.
PJ, yes. Bye.
Good night, everybody.
Bye. Take
Good day,
care.
everybody.
Good seeing
Bye-bye.
you.
Good night.